Hello, welcome to the presentation on feminist criticism. I am Dr. Manojas from the Department of English, Fatima Mada National College, Kollam. This is not going to be an advanced presentation on feminist criticism, but a very fundamental and basic one intended for UG students. Feminist criticism developed into a dominant and influential movement in the 1970s. But its ancestry can be traced back to the works of Madame de Staël, George Eliot, Virginia Woolf, Rebecca West, and Simone de Beauvoir. Feminist criticism vehemently questions the orthodoxy in literary tradition and literary interpretation, which has been largely established by male critics. It questions phallocentrism and phallogocentrism. Phallocentrism is the male centered view of life, and phallogocentrism is the male dominated discourse. So, to be precise, the feminist movement questions the patriarchal ideology and the patriarchal system as such, patriarchal domination, patriarchal structures which you find everywhere in society. Feminist criticism is as much an avant-garde movement like deconstruction, and it has many facets like a sociological, anthropological, psychoanalytical, textual, and ideological. One of the prime tasks of feminist criticism has been to deconstruct what is derogatorily called patriarchal metaphysics. So, this movement started as a political one demanding equality with men, equal status for women with men. But it later changed its directions. As we all know, there are different waves of feminism, different modes of feminism: postmodern feminism, Marxist feminism, ecofeminism. Likewise, there have been what we label as the first wave feminism, the second wave feminism, and there are, of course, a lot of different groups too. We have labels such as a radical feminist. So, feminism is not a uniform and homogeneous movement. Feminist critics had their differences of opinions. Now, if you look at the theoretical foundation of feminist studies, then Simone de Beauvoir's book, The Second Sex, which was published in 1949, is thought of as foundational. So, this book is thought of as laying the foundations for feminist studies. Simone de Beauvoir observed the asymmetry between man and woman. Humanity is collectively called humanity, and we speak about the human, while woman is the other. Kate Millett is another important feminist critic. Her work, Sexual Politics, which was published in 1961, is important in the sense that it has made a virulent attack. It has made a very strong attack on patriarchy or the rule of the father, which has for centuries distorted the position and role of women in society. Millett distinguishes sex from gender. Sex is biological, whereas gender is a cultural construct. The undermining of women's position aligns all these feminist critics and their politics with that of Marxism, and Marxist ideology which champions the underprivileged. Feminist politics even recalls to mind the ideology of the blacks, who have been the oppressed class not only in Africa but in Europe, in the United States of America, and in the rest of the world. Another important critic is Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf's works of non-fiction and her novels have exerted a pioneering influence on feminist criticism. Her works reveal the resentment against the denial of opportunities of education and of lucrative employment for women. In her very famous work, A Room of One's Own, Virginia Woolf locates part of the issue of feminism in the material conditions of her times. Virginia Woolf even attempted an analysis of discourse, exploring the possibility of developing a female language. So this effort has started with Virginia Woolf to develop, uh, exploring the possibility of the development of an exclusive female language, and probably the search for an exclusive feminist framework to interpret their works. Recent feminist critics have been called gynocritics. Their ambition has been to construct a female framework for the analysis of women's literature, because they felt that a different, a separate, and an exclusive framework is needed for the analysis of women's literature. All those other critical theories and frameworks actually created and constructed by um, male dominated groups of critics cannot be taken, adapted, or used for interpreting women's literature as such. So that was the idea. Elaine Showalter was a leading feminist theorist in this mode. She had published a book called A Literature of Their Own. In that book, she observes that gynocritics aim to develop new models which are actually based on new insights into female experiences and which are made available by research in many disciplines. This is where feminist criticism becomes multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, taking insights from different critical approaches and disciplines. French feminist critics made considerable theoretical advance by drawing profusely from Jacques Lacan's work in the field of psychoanalysis. But we have to recall that early feminist critics resented the founding father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, and his attributing penis envy to women, because they resented Freud's dictum that anatomy is destiny. They rejected that. Anatomy is destiny. That was the idea of Freud, and feminist critics resisted this idea. To feminists, this stance from the part of Freud was yet another instance of male aggression and appropriation of privilege and presence, which they were fighting against all along. But when it comes to Lacan, Lacan too does not reject phallocentrism as such, because he too sees the phallus as power. But what Lacan does is that he steers clear of biological determinism. Lacan points out that there is no natural correspondence between woman as signifier and things designated by the term ladies. As an instance, Lacan notes and presents the instance of the label on the bathroom door. This he calls symbolic, as different from an original sign like tree, which is iconic and natural. Now, coming to post structuralist feminist critics, the likes of Julia Kristeva, they actually accept this distinction as useful in constructing their ideology. Julia Kristeva regards the female as open and flowing and therefore resisting crystallization. For her, the female stands for creativity, which is itself fluid. Helen Sixos is there, who is regarded as the prophet of the female world. She has discarded Virginia Woolf's advocacy of androgyny. Now, one of the real achievements of feminist criticism has been to draw attention to the fact that gender and relationships between men and women are central themes in literature. Feminist criticism is a radical criticism which seeks not merely to describe the way things are, but to challenge the status quo. Feminist critics claim that traditional criticism has silenced or suppressed the debate about gender because it was patriarchal in nature and therefore it was in its own interest to suppress the female voice. One aspect of this is that there are many novels by and about women, such as the works published by Virago, which male critics have all along ignored, as if these works are not worth discussing as literature. But once the critical premises are changed, argues the feminist critics, and it is established and argued that male and female identity have always been central issues in society, then such books become interesting and worth discussing. Feminist critics have concentrated on the study of women's writings, which they see as the expression of a distinct female consciousness. They try to establish a coherent literary tradition consisting of the works of women writers. It is also a part of their program to evolve a comprehensive critical theory and a set of conceptual rules for the analysis and interpretation of literary texts, particularly by those written by women. But despite their obvious concern with women's writings, they have tried to assimilate the concepts and norms of a patriarchal literary tradition because it is only by this means that they can validate their own critical theories. So this seems to be paradoxical and ironical because, because they have been fighting the patriarchal system. They have been fighting patriarchal ideology, but at the same time, they could not resist imbibing ideas from ideologies and critical theories and frameworks constructed by male writers and critics, prominently by male writers and critics. And they have done this. They have taken insights, they have taken inputs, ideas from linguistics. They have taken ideas from structuralism, from post-structuralist theories like deconstruction, from psychoanalysis, Lacan's ideas, which we have already discussed. They have taken ideas from Marxist ideologies. So they have done this, even though they fight patriarchal ideology and patriarchal structures and systems. So what they find useful, they try to incorporate. So in this sense, they are open. The feminist approach represents an international movement in literary criticism now. But still, it does not have a homogeneous theoretical framework, and this is a drawback. In the USA, feminist criticism is pragmatic and humanistic and is allied to left wing political ideology and women's liberation movement. But in France and Germany, it is committed to abstract thoughts and theories and has drawn insights from Caesarean linguistics, cultural anthropology, psychoanalysis, deconstruction, and semiotics, as we have discussed. The most active groups of feminist critics in Europe have found a genuine reuniting center, a rallying center around the issue of gender, defining the word gender within a feministic framework. So they have been trying to redefine the whole idea of gender and the word gender from a cultural point of view. Now, if the early feminist critical writings have been political in nature, a recent feminist criticism has been called gynocriticism. Now, what is the program of gynocritics? It is to construct a female framework for the analysis of women's literature in particular and to develop new models which are based on the study of female expression rather than to adapt male models and theories. So they are against, even though they have taken inputs from male models and theories, they are against adapting male models and theories as such. Now we will wind up the discussion with a quote from Elaine Showalter. She feels that the task of the feminist critics is to find, I quote, a new language, a new way of reading that can interpret our intelligence and our experience, our reason and our suffering, our skepticism and our vision. Thank you all for listening.